Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joe. This is my partner in crime, Brendan. We're graduate students at the University of Akron. We're studying for our MAs in Industrial Organizational Psychology. We're also graduates of Cleveland State University in the same program that you're in, and Lorain County Community College, where we did our associate's programs, all in this room.
So as Joe kind of talked about a little bit before, so we're here to help you guys understand more about the graduate application process. So this includes the GRE, also anything else you guys want to know about being in graduate school, getting in, what it's like, what it means for your career. So feel free to ask questions. So this is not as formal as what it looks. You guys are free to ask questions throughout the presentation at the end, whenever you feel that it's fit. And yeah, just go through. Sure. Yeah, we can hold the Q&As off till the end then. So.
Okay, first and foremost, what's the GRE? Does anybody have any idea what the GRE is?
Hopefully someone.
No one? Anyone? Okay, cool. Well, let's go over it. Basically, it's a test for graduate school and for business school. All right? It's a standardized test that most universities accept. It's computer adaptive. What's a computer adaptive test? Oh, Dr. Fouts, they don't know what a computer adaptive test is?
Someone
That's
knows.
okay.
What's a computer adaptive test?
It's like it's tiered down, so like the more questions you get wrong or right, it will get progressively harder or easier.
Right. Correct. It's designed to specifically identify your level of preparedness for graduate school. All right, and it measures verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, critical thinking, and your analytical writing skills. Go ahead.
Okay, so with the GRE, there will be 7 total parts that you'll take, but they fit in under like larger categories. So the first will be analytical writing. So you'll have 30 minutes for each one. The first prompt will be like analyzing an issue. So this just present like an overall idea or topic, and then you'll have to kind of take a stance on one side or the other of the issue and then support your argument. And I think Joe will explain that a little bit more on the next slide. And then the next is analyzing an argument. So this is where they write a prompt where they've already decided one direction or the other, which way they feel, and you have to come in, whether or not you also believe that same direction, you have to be able to support their statement and continue on with it. So the next is verbal reasoning. So this is 20 questions, 30 minutes, and there's 2 segments of this. Then you have quant, and these are all mixed. So the first 2, you could get analyze an issue first, you could get analyze an argument first. The verbal and the quantitative reasoning, it depends. So like the person next to you might get the 2 verbal first and then the 2 quant second, or it could go 1-1-1. It really depends. And then there's a 5th item that they use just kind of for research and development. And this will be either the verbal or the quant. So you'll actually end up taking 3 of one and 2 of the other of the verbal and the quant sections. However, only 4 of them will be scored. And you don't know which one's the test because it would defeat the purpose if you did. So that's kind of the structure. And then the total test time is about 3 hours and 45 minutes. 10-minute break.
Okay, to find more information about the GRE, there's multiple sources that you need to explore as a student preparing for the GRE. First, ets.org/GRE. They're the people who create the GRE. They do all the design. They have a plethora of information that's available to you for free right off of their own website. Second, hit up your fellow students. Has anyone here taken the GRE yet or practiced GRE? You take a practice or you take a real GRE? Both? There's a fountain of information right there. You should all line up immediately after class and say, okay, did they tell us the truth? Okay. Third, where I spent a majority of my time was on YouTube. It's free. It's my favorite thing in the whole world to do. All right. I look up topics like dominate the GRE. There's an entire series about how to take the GRE. GRE is not only an assessment of your ability to answer a question correctly, it's also timed. It's on your ability to use analytical thinking to narrow down an answer. Hit up for GRE verbal reasoning and GRE preparation. Those are 3 of the key topics that you can go in there and search and then just build off of them. And 4th, everybody's fallback for everything, our friend Google, okay? There is unlimited information that's available.
So preparing for the GRE, there's a lot of different things that you can use. Joe kind of touched on like how YouTube is a good resource, Google. So one thing that really worked for me is I actually got a hand-me-down GRE test practice book from another student that was studying for the GRE. And you can kind of work through at your own pace, which worked really well for me. So I could go through and, understand I need to focus more on quant over verbal or whatever, fits your needs. And then one thing that really worked for me is there was an online virtual run through of the test. So you actually got to do a full simulation, get a score, and kind of see where you're at. For me, this was like the best form of practice because while going through the book and answering the questions individually will help you really hone in your skills. As Joe said, time management is actually one of the biggest things being measured with this, just because if you take too much time working through your problems, you won't be able to achieve a score that you'd like. So the time management piece was really, really helpful. Amazon's really, really good. Again, people can buy books. You guys can share them, things like that.
All right, here's a breakdown of a general study guide or schedule for about 3 months. It does not take 3 months to study for the GRE. It also doesn't take an afternoon to study for the GRE. It all depends on your ability to understand the questions and your ability to absorb the kind of knowledge you're going to need to absorb. I knew going into the GRE that I was going to do fine on statistics. Thank you, Mr. Jordan. All right, I knew that I was going to do fine on simple math and a little bit of stuff like that. What I knew I wasn't going to be able to be successful at was geometry. I'm sorry. I can't figure out how many basketballs are going to fit inside a Ford Focus. It's just not going to happen. So my recommendation is spend the first month or so in a context review format, okay? You have the same layout. It breaks it down week by week on your participants guide that you have with you there. Not written in stone, ladies and gentlemen. Please just adapt it to fit your schedule, but commit that time. If you're going to do an hour and a half of instruction on verbal reasoning, then spend an hour and a half on it. Don't spend 45 minutes on it and then bounce, okay? Spend that time to look at it as an additional class. Another way to build yourself into that is to find a partner to work with. Brendan and I do everything together. He holds me to a standard and I hold him to a standard. And it's been that way for 3 or 4 years now, okay? Because I know that I can trust him and he knows that he can trust me. So if you have a person who's interested in the same field that you're interested in, like IO psychology, get together with that person and come up with a plan, build it together, and then when you're sitting around here 20 minutes prior to class, whip out those vocabulary cards and go through that verbal reasoning or attempt to work on geometry. It's a waste of time. It's magic, okay? All right, the second month, spend it in content review and developing your strategy. What I didn't mention in the beginning is that a large portion of the GRE is strategy, and you're not even graded on that, okay? I knew that I could buzz through a math section pretty doggone easily using deductive reasoning, all right? But I knew that I was going to struggle in my verbal reasoning where you start out with 1 blank, then you go to 2 blanks, and you get to 3 blanks, so you have to fill in 1 blank. It's like, come on, man. That's intro to English stuff right there. But 3 blanks, and they're all really long words with like 9+ letters. Okay, we need spend a little bit of time on coming up with the strategy on how to attack those problems. And then in your final month, complete that review and start working on your writing prep if that's an area that you need to focus on. I'd also suggest fitting in there at least 1 or 2 minimum practice tests in a full environment. In my old house, I had a small office. I closed the door. I gave myself 3 hours and 45 minutes with a 10-minute break in there where I hand wrote my analytical writing that was done from a test online. And I actually took a practice exam online at the same pace and distance. So I knew that if I was going to take water in there, how much water I needed to drink. I don't want to say the story again, but there's a situation that came up when I took the GRE that I didn't properly plan for, and it actually cost me in my score, and I can identify exactly where that happened.
Just to expand on this really quick, Joe made a good point about getting in study groups or finding an accountability partner. It doesn't have to be someone that has the same major as you. So if you just know that someone else is taking the GRE or pursuing graduate school, team up with them, get a small study group together, whatever works for you, and then sometimes it actually helps to have people from other disciplines just for getting a better understanding of other majors in psych or in business in general. So where to take the GRE? So they have 3 sections that are offered in within an hour location. So we have Middleburg Heights, Mentor, and Akron. The way the scheduling works is I think it's offered 5 days a week? Or?
It's about 5 days a week, yes.
Okay, so then you go online and then you essentially pick your seat, you pay your fee of $205, and then you just schedule at which location you'd like to take it, and then show up on test day and
Take a test.
take the test.
That's $205 per iteration. So if you go in and take the GRE and come out with a score of like 5, like you're going to pay $205 to do that again. Okay, you don't get unlimited retests. All right, what's test day like? Probably the most nerve-wracking portion of the entire test is walking in the door. It's going to feel like a high security situation. You're going to walk in, there's a person that you don't know at a desk who's going to want every bit of everything electronic that you have on you. Your cell phone, just leave it in the car. Your Apple Watch, just leave it in the car. Anything fancy, you're not going to take it in, okay? She's going to verify your identification. You're actually going to be searched. They take out a wand and they wand you down like you're at the airport. You'll be escorted into a room with a person who checks you in, and there will be other people that are already taking the test, okay? You'll be given noise-canceling headphones that hang on the wall in there that every other person in the universe has used, so, I mean, just deal with it, right? You're going to be surveilled. There's cameras everywhere, just like in the testing center here, and there's a person who sits outside of the testing room and stares at those cameras the entire time. There's a calculator on screen, so you can't bring in your rusty, trusty TI-84. Has anyone seen the sweet ETS.org calculator yet? It takes practice, okay? You're not just going to go in and click away on that thing. You have to actually know how to operate it. And you'll get 1 10-minute break during your session. You need to take this break. You need to take this break as an emotional, just get out of the room for a couple of minutes. You need to take this break if you need to use the restroom. You need to take this break so you're not sitting down staring at the computer. Please don't just trudge through it.
And just to add to this, so I saw some of your faces as Joe was going through like all the different pieces, and it's only intimidating and scary if you don't know all this going in. So like now that you guys have this information, you should walk in a lot more confident. You're not going to be surprised when the lady asks you to take off every piece of electronics that you have in your pocket or on your wrist, and you know, when you get wanded down. So now that you guys have this information, it's much less intimidating. And had Joe and I known what we know now going in, it would have been a lot less of like a barrier going in.
Yes.
So.
Are we able to take the 10-minute break whenever we want?
No.
Okay.
I believe it's like halfway through the
Yeah,
test.
it's
So
halfway through the test.
You're writing, and then after 2 of your quant and verbal sections.
Okay.
So.
And now that 10 minutes, let's define the 10 minutes here. There's a 10-minute running clock, but you have to check out, you have to travel down the hallway, do what you need to do, and then you need to check back in, be researched, and then carried back to your desk too. So you need to like make that decision, and so just write it down. I'm going to take a 10-minute break.
Well, and also if you're like late coming back from your 10-minute break, your clock and your test will just start. So you know, they don't like kick you off, they don't fail you or anything like that, but you might only have 27 minutes on the 30-minute exam that you needed every minute of that for. So just make sure you guys are, you know, calculating that, as Joe said. Is this me?
Yeah, it's you, sure.
So when should you take the GRE? So Joe and I both took the GRE the summer before our senior year. We did some research and talked to other graduate students. This is pretty much like the focal time where a lot of us try to get that done. So a lot of applications have early deadlines of, I've seen some as early as like November of the prior year. So for example, if you were to not do as well as you'd like and you weren't able to get into the school of your choice in that summer, you now have 2 or 3 months of a buffer period before those applications are due to where you can study, hopefully elevate your score a little bit, and then apply to the school again. So it's also good to strategize with the advisors. I know the faculty here are definitely willing to help you guys strategize with that. So definitely leverage that if you can.
What if you don't do well on a GRE? It happens, okay? People collapse under the pressure of a GRE, or you didn't prepare yourself enough, okay? Just because you don't do fantastic on the GRE doesn't mean that you're not going to get into graduate schools. Some universities don't even look at the GRE. They may take another exam called the GMAT. Some of them do not care at all. Know this before you run in and take your GRE, all right? Dr. Gonzalez has a fantastic graduate studies book that kind of gives you a level that each university is looking for, roughly, for your application. And when we talk about doing well, it's operationalized by what you want to do, okay? So an average score is about 150, okay, on each section.
So that average score means that you are an average student. I know it's like a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people to be average. I spent my first 6 months at Akron not understanding why I was average, because I did fine here. I had a great time here, and then I got over there and I wasn't as smart as everybody else, okay? So just because you get a mean score, that means that you're at the top of the, you're average. That's it. You're average, that's it. It's no big deal, because you're going up against other students who have historically taken this exact same test, who are also of the same intellectual knowledge that you are.
Yeah, I think that's something like good to highlight. So it's you know, the average component, the 50th percentile, it's of all the students that are looking to go and get an advanced degree. So basically what he's saying is don't get upset by a average score, because it's really a great score or a very solid score. This is the score that around what Joe and I got in order to get into graduate school. So definitely know what schools you're looking at and what their requirements are, and have that as like your North Star, your kind of goal to see where you where you need to be. And then Joe and I went to school with someone who wanted a certain score to get in a certain school. They weren't able to get there, but they just pivoted. So they found a different program that worked for them, and they're happy in their program. So just don't get stuck if you find yourself in that position to where you didn't score as high as you wanted, because there's plenty of options. The GRE calculator. Do you want to take this? I feel like
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Like I said previously, you don't get to take in your own calculator into the GRE. All right. And actually, an on-screen calculator looks a lot like that one. Will come up onto the screen, and it is as basic of a calculator as possible. So if you don't know the correct order to put your mathematical problem in, it's going to spit out the wrong answer every single time. Okay. So if you don't know your PEDMIS. Yeah, get on that right now, okay? It is not easy to use. It is not fast. It's pretty doggone slow, and you're navigating it with a mouse, okay? Which is, if any of you use your iPhones, your TI-84 or whatever, is not what you're used to doing. But there are emulators that are available online, okay? So whip out that old math book that you have from your first year, sit down, find one of these emulators, and go ahead and click away on that thing until you're comfortable with it.
So I touched on the scoring a little bit, but again, it's based on like percentile rank. So they score it on like a normalized curve based on people in that year, or maybe a couple years back even, with where people are scoring. So you're being compared to your peers that are also going to graduate school. So as Joe's highlighted here, so the two larger boxes on the right-hand side represent the percentile rank. The left is like your raw score. So do you know what the left column is?
It's verbal and quantitative.
Verbal and quant. So like a score of 154, you'd be in the 65th percentile for verbal and the 55th percentile for quant. Again, these scores really mean not a whole lot unless you know what your target score is for your school. So, if you know that you need to be in the 60th percentile for both, then your goal is going to be much different from someone who needs to get a 150, just based on, skill, aptitude, and then whatever your goal is.
All right, let's go over a little bit of verbal reasoning, okay? Vain and prone to violence. All right, the easiest for me to do was to read the question several times, maybe 2 or 3 times, so I'm very comfortable with the question and try to put it in a situation. And then I actually worked backwards by putting in the second word first and then the first word last. It just, for me, was my technique of making it go. Anyone want to take a stab at it? Go ahead.
Would it be in the first blank notoriety and then the second tumultuous?
We can try again.
One
Anyone
of them's
else?
correct, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone else want to try? Come at me.
First one is C and the other one is F.
Almost. All right. A little bit. Eminence and tumultuous. Words that we use every single day, people. Come on. I mean, that's what my kids call me, is eminence. And my wife describes me as tumultuous. Okay, so the best thing you do is some deductive reasoning here and go through and attempt to figure out which words are best suited for you, that you're most comfortable with, and work backwards for me.
And also with this, it's, as we talked about earlier, it's computer adaptive, right? So you might start with one where there's only one blank, then there'll be 2, and I think the max that mine or yours both got up was 3. So you'll have more than a sentence or 2. It'll be more like a paragraph, a small paragraph, where you have to read through, understand the context, and do 3 different fill in the blanks. And again, as Joe said, you have to get all 3 correct in order to get the question correct. So it's super important to take your time. not too much time because you have to make sure you can finish the test. But one thing that really worked for me is flipping through a lot of the vocab words in the GRE study guides and in the books, and really focusing on like the root word. So I know this is going back to like, grade school stuff, but if you can really focus on what the root word is and try to, any prefix and suffix, take it off and not really worry about it, it might help you figure out what the word means and enough to get the question correct.
I'm gonna take the next one too.
Sure.
All right, now we're gonna move into quantitative reasoning. All right, who's really good at math? Who's super comfortable in math? You are? Okay, cool. Let's work this one together. So you're gonna be presented with a question of quantity A, which is 54% of 360, or quantity B, which is 150. And you have to determine whether quantity A is greater, quantity B is greater, the two quantities are equal, or the relationship cannot be determined from the information given. All right, now you remember you're on a time frame here, and you need to work through this as quickly as possible. This is a very easy problem, all right? So if we go, let's figure out what's 54% of 360. Who cares? That's the answer, okay? 50% of 360 is what? Is 180. Who cares about the other 4%, which is 12.4? But I mean, it doesn't matter, okay? So we already know that 50%, which is 180, is greater than quantity B, which is 150, right? We don't have to do any math at all, just look at it. So we already know that quantity A is going to be greater.
And this is kind of a, like Joe said, a softball question. So you might start off with questions like this, but it gets much more difficult. So like the whole function of equations is something that I really struggled with because it was something I hadn't touched on since like middle school. So it, make sure that you know when you're going through the study process which areas that you're really struggling with, and just kind of become like super focused on those areas so you're not tripped up when you get to the test.
Easy enough?
Okay, so for the analytical writing, we touched on it a little bit earlier. So it's about, they'll identify a general problem, and then you then have to kind of take your stance. So for this, as people rely more and more on technology to solve problems, the ability of humans to think for themselves will surely deteriorate. So then the second portion of the question talks about how you need to go in and analyze and take your side. So the best recommendation I have for this is just, one, make sure you understand the prompt very clearly before you go through and strategize. I think, Joe, it's even on the handout, take about 5 minutes to come up with like an outline of how you want to write, 20 minutes actually writing, and then 5 minutes for the editing process for the question.
I'm going to go to my notes on this one, all right? Like we talked about earlier, you get 30 minutes to do this, and when you're typing, there's no F7 spell check, okay? So if you are conscious that you have difficulty spelling certain words, avoid those words, okay? The GRE graders do not care on your opinion of the argument. You could have some wild, outlandish, freaky. My question was, a bookstore had a children's book department and they wanted to get rid of it and replace it with a coffee shop. And I took an argument to it. And on mine, I said that we should keep the children's thing and get rid of it and not install the coffee shop. But we need to do it for financial reasons, for reasons to stay in contact with our community. And I detailed these reasons, okay? Going into it, please make yourself a plan. Have about 5 minutes to read it and make yourself an outline. You'll have a piece of paper and a pencil with you so you can kind of sketch an outline. Then take 20 minutes to sit down and write it and just kind of like word vomit onto the page. Get as many words as you can in there that make sense, okay? And then take about 5 minutes to edit. When you go back and read through, you'll see all the mistakes that you made along the way. Don't worry about correcting them when you're typing them. But if you know, I know that I put the letter S on words for absolutely no reason, so I have to go back and reread everything to delete a majority of my S's. All right, it's standard writing. All right, this should be an introduction, it should be a main paragraph, make roughly 3 points in that paragraph, and have a conclusion that works like a standard normal conclusion would for any paper that you're working on.
And we'll share this PowerPoint with you guys, so don't feel the need to get everything down now, because
Yes.
you'll be able to read over it. And then all the same rules that Joe and I just talked about applies for the analyzing an argument. The only difference is instead of you having to look at an issue and pick a side, someone's already chosen a side for you, now you have to support it. So again, the most challenging part about this is if you're reading a prompt and you're like, wow, I don't really agree with that at all, you have to kind of put that aside and find ways to support the side that they've taken in order to get a good score on the question.
What are your questions?
And So these questions can be about the GRE, but like I said, Joe and I are in our beginning of our second year of graduate school, so the whole experience is fairly fresh, fairly raw. So like any questions you guys have about graduate school, like lifestyle or anything, it can be above and beyond the GRE, just anything in general. We're here to answer your guys' questions. So.
What is a class, what is a master's level class like? How does it differ from undergraduate studies?
So I think for us, the first way that it's different is we're set up in a cohort system. So we have 7 masters and then 4 PhD students in the IO program at Akron. So when we come into class, we are given, prior to class, anywhere from like 4 to 8 journal articles per week that we have to read and be prepared. So when you come into class, as opposed to maybe more lecture style where there's a PowerPoint and the professor might ask a question every now and again just for make sure you guys are awake. It's more of student-led discussion. So I know last year, it's not the case this semester right now just because of the professor, but Joe and I would have to read all the articles for the week. We would have to prep the questions, prep the conversation, and we would lead class discussion for a 3-hour period. So we would come in, we would go through the articles just as the professor would, ask questions. We were supposed to be the point expert. So if you guys have ever done a presentation for a class over like a book chapter, I feel like I remember doing it for some of your classes. It's kind of similar to that, just a little bit more in depth. I like it a lot just because I really like I feel like I learn a lot more from the back and forth between the other students who are reading because they interpret things different than I do or they picked up on things that I overlooked. So I like it a lot. I learn a lot from that. So anything to add?
Just that it's a great opportunity to develop yourself as a facilitator. As a professional, you're going to find yourself in positions where you have to talk to other people about sometimes subjects you're not completely 100% aware of. But this gives you an opportunity to go out there and do some Keith and Freeze and learn about error management, how you're going to relay your message without knowing everything, but getting the message out to the people.
And also I think it's a little bit different than undergraduate because I feel like there's not as much time in the undergrad class to really kind of dive into the weeds on different topics, whereas in graduate school, we're taking a course just on feedback. So feedback is this like microscopic area in the world of psychology, but when you break it out and that's your only class, there's a lot of content that you can get in. So, we're learning about all that right now. So as opposed to kind of understanding general concepts and topics within psychology or within your program, you're learning just very recent research, things that are working in the field, and things that are hopefully being transferred from research to practitioner. Yeah.
Yes.
Whenever you went to on your search for graduate school, did you focus more on what you wanted to do, or did you focus more on the credibility of the university and their requirements and stuff like that?
There's a balance that you need to find. Once you get into graduate school, you are in an area. You're focused in that area, whether it be IO or counseling or an MBA or whatever it is. That's what you're going to do. If you're not 100% sold on that subject, you need to find a different program. Okay,
See, but I also think I would prioritize your own needs first. So
Yes.
whatever your interest level is or whatever you feel like your aptitude, your skill level is at that point, kind of set that aside and be like, okay, ideally, what would I like to do? And then if you know that you want to go into counseling psychology, find all the top schools and then go look at the book, see what the requirements are, and then kind of deduce from that. So if you know that, okay, I really want to get into the top counseling or clinical psychology program, however, I need to score in the 75th percentile, it's a really good score, and it's really difficult to get. So maybe you should refocus your goals a little and see where you can fit into a program after studying and kind of aligning yourself up for that. Because that's kind of the tactic Joe and I took. So we got really lucky that Akron had a really great IO program. They've been up and down in the rankings all over the place, but kind of on average they're around 10th for their rankings. So we're super lucky that they were close. We had a great reference from Dr. Faust that we're sure helped. Yeah, just kind of focus on what you wanna do first, and then look to see what the requirements are after. Yeah.
Here's one over here.
How much do you enjoy being in graduate school, and also do you receive any financial assistance?
Brendan's right. That's a loaded question. No one enjoys graduate school. Has anyone ever? Dr. Faust is a liar. She did. I know for a fact that Dr. Faust loved graduate school. It is a pleasurable experience. It is a nth level dive into an area that you're very interested in. You don't have to take a biology class when you're in graduate school unless you're going to be a biologist, okay? You don't have to take science. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You just take cool classes like multivariate statistics, which is awesome, okay? All right? And for the financial side, no.
So
In PhD programs, you get a stipend. Well, the way that our PhD program works is that our PhD students receive a stipend from the state, and they have a tuition waiver. It does not apply for the MA students.
So it depends on the program and depends on the school. So
Yes.
for, like Joe said, at Akron, we are fully responsible for paying all tuition for MA. But when you're a graduate student, I think in undergrad you get up to like $6,000 or $7,000 in federal loans. That number goes up to $29,000 because there's medical students who have super high tuition, things of that nature. So that doesn't mean take it all, but take what you need. Yeah, we didn't get any support for the master's level, the PhD stipend, and through their assistantship, so they actually do teaching. So the PhD students will teach all of the freshman like intro level psych courses. So they're compensated for that with free tuition essentially. Other schools, there were other programs that Joe and I looked into where the master's was funded or partially funded. So if you know that that's a priority for you, that finances has to be something that's in your equation and figuring out where you want to go, definitely do your research and make sure that that program offers that if that's what you need. So.
Yes.
Pressure.
What's your lifestyle like in your master's program? Do you have somewhat a fair amount of free time? Are you constantly hitting the books? Like, what's it like?
So last year, the way our program works is they front load a lot of the courses. So it's a 2-year program. So the first year we had 6 or 7 classes spread over the first few semesters. But with graduate level classes, having 3 at a time is a lot to manage. So the way they structure that, because the second year we're kind of encouraged more to intern and get like more practical experience. So this semester has actually kind of been like a weight off our shoulders. We're only in one class. We're 1 day a week. It's a 3-hour class. Still the same level of reading for that class specifically, but instead of reading, 16 articles a week, we're only reading 8. So it's like, it kind of feels like a load off, which is funny to say because if we were assigned that in undergrad, we would, probably freak out.
Collapse under the pressure.
Yeah, but I think that's another good thing to check with the program you're applying to is like what the workload is like. So I was still actually able to work part-time last year, and this year I've kind of like ramped up my hours just because, having to move to Akron, you pay for rent, food, everything else. So just depending on your personal situation, in my personal opinion, if you're really dedicated, you'll find a way to make it work with the time management. But just definitely make sure that school's a priority because it's one of those things. I just had a discussion with one of our advisors. It's one of the things that's kind of immovable when you're in grad school. So your test is still going to come, your final exam, your graduation exam. They're all hard deadlines. So making sure to prioritize so you're ready for that is really important. Yeah.
Come on.
When it comes to looking for internships and that kind of stuff, paid or unpaid, what's the easiest way to approach that situation?
The University of Akron has connections with local businesses that were able to help us set up internships. But that is not a requirement and it's not a guarantee. You can't go to the interview knowing that you're going to get the job because you may not, okay? Because they're looking for specific people with specific interests. Brendan was lucky, he reached out to SHRM and he actually spent the summer in Virginia working for the top human resources organization in the States. And I got lucky with the corporate college at Cuyahoga Community College and was able to work there for the summer. But it's still on you, but you have that fallback in our program of the university actually going out and assisting you with that. As far as the paid and the unpaid thing, I would say as a graduate student, you are going to get paid, okay?
I would say most disciplines you should expect to get paid.
Yes, that should be part of your plan.
Going off of that too, as far as like the actual mediums that you use to find internships, one is leverage your network. So like the people that you know just personally, friends, family, and then when you get into graduate school, you're obviously, your network expanded a lot because you have a lot of graduate students around you. They're all looking for internships. I know there are a lot of times where Joe's like, hey, I applied to these 2 or 3, doesn't really work for me, but are you interested? I can hook you up with a recruiter. So just kind of things like that. I found mine with SHRM through Indeed. I know a lot of you guys probably know what Indeed is. It's super popular job board. So they do a great job of like making sure that all the internships are updated consistently. You can set up alerts. It's kind of what I did to find the internship with SHRM. So, yeah.
Yes.
We need at least like one question from each table.
Yeah. So put your heads together and come up with a good question.
How reasonable is it to, let's say, get your bachelor's degree, take a break, go full-time for a while, and then go into the master's program? How reasonable is that? Is it better to go straight into a master's program? What's a good way to look at that?
By full-time, are you talking about full-time employment?
Yes.
Oh,
So I would say this is definitely a case-by-case question and answer, because I feel like if you're someone who's extremely dedicated, and I know this works a lot of times with like nursing students, so they'll get their 4-year degree, they'll go work as a BSN for a year or 2, and then go back and apply for graduate school. So I know that structure is already like a paved path that works really well. In psychology, it's a little bit different in that a lot of people tend to kind of transition right into graduate school because, as we know, with a bachelor's in psych, we're kind of limited in what kind of jobs we can get. It worked out really well for me to go straight from undergrad right into my graduate degree because I think you're kind of in stride, you have a momentum going, and I know even being away for the summer at my internship where I'm still using what I'm learning in school but not being in the same school mode, like definitely like a hangover effect when you get back to school. Like it's just different. So unless you know that you're extremely personally driven and that you're able to kind of set that goal of like, hey, I'm going to take 2 years off and go right back and have that set up, I would recommend going straight from undergrad into graduate school. Yeah. Any questions?
yes. She's carrying you guys.
Right.
How did you transition? Because I know one of you was in the university partnership here. Is that correct?
We both were.
We
Yep.
both were.
Okay. How did you make that transition from the university partnership into moving onto campus or staying somewhere near campus? How was that transition?
You talk about this a little bit first. Yeah.
Okay.
You made a big transition.
I made a rather large transition. I was here at LC3 for 16 years. Anybody up even close to that number to complete my bachelor's? I took a little bit of time off. Anyways, I actually sold my house and moved to Medina so I wouldn't have to commute from, I lived in Lorain, so I wouldn't have to do the commute. So it was backwards planning from the time that I received my invitation to the university until like August the 1st when I moved in, totally last minute into my new home in Medina. So I went in with the plan knowing that I'm going to go to the University of Akron, and these are the steps that need to happen prior. And that was with a newborn and one on the way and a spouse and all the joys that come along with that.
So my situation was a little bit different because I had the goal originally of just driving from here in Elyria down to Akron every day. Lasted about like 3 weeks because after I got into like the thickness of school and like every hour back and forth that I was spending in the car going to and from school, I'm like, I could be reading an article and getting this done. And like, I know it sounds nerdy, but it's like you have to manage your time that way. Otherwise, it's really difficult to get things done. So as things really ramped up 3 or 4 weeks in, I ended up finding a place on just off campus to live, and actually liked it. So it worked out well.
Yes.
So you said you guys didn't receive funding for the master's program. Are there assistantships available? Did you apply, or are there just none available at all?
At the master's level at our school for our program, they offered absolutely nothing. So I don't even know if there are any third-party like donor scholarships that were specifically geared to our program. There may have been just graduate student general scholarships that maybe Joe and I overlooked, but we talked with our advisors at the University of Akron, and they really said there's not a whole lot. But again, that's a very specific to our program. A lot of other people that we know that went to graduate school from our graduating class did get a little bit of support. So it really depends on where you're going and what your program is.
And it was the same thing for Cleveland State's consumer organizational research. Is that what it is over there? Same with their program. There was no assistantships that were available for MA students.
So when you go take the test, is it all online or is there like a paper option?
It's all digital.
All digital.
All on
yeah.
the computer, which is actually really nice. I mean, a lot of us probably remember taking the ACT. It's not fun, especially that it's pen and paper. So doing it digitally is really nice. It kind of really seamless, goes through quick. So.
On average, how much does it cost to go to graduate school? Just like an estimate.
You can't really answer this
I
question.
can't answer it. It's free for me.
Yeah, Joe got a scholarship through the VA, right? So, so I think total, I've taken about like 22 grand worth of loans out for grad school. So again, it just depends. I think it's around like $450 per credit hour. So then if you just have to know how many credit hours the school is, but I went into grad school with very little loans from undergrad. I was able to do pretty well here at LC and then go to Cleveland State. And then grad school kicked in, and grad school tuition's a little bit more expensive, so it kind of racked up bills a little bit quicker. But I mean, you'll make it back, and that's how you have to look at it. It's an investment, and your earning potential after getting the graduate degree is hopefully much higher than what it would have been at a four-year degree. So nothing to sweat about too much.
Yes.
We got till 1, so keep the questions coming.
Did you guys ever consider going into a PhD program? And if so, why a master's program?
First.
I did. I applied for the PhD program at the University of Akron. And I was very confident that I was going to be in the PhD program. And then I met our PhD students. And they're really smart.
Next level.
They are an echelon above me for my understanding of my knowledge.
So I looked into PhD programs, but then when I kind of dug in a little bit more into like what that would mean, like what would my motivation be for going for a PhD, it didn't really align. So like I knew I wanted to go get knowledge on IO and be a practitioner or go straight into the workforce. People that are in a PhD level, a lot of them still do go applied and like work as maybe like director of research, things of that nature. But a lot of it is, you know, they are, in addition to reading all the articles that Joe and I are reading, they're taking more classes than us. They're teaching. They're running their own research labs. It's just, when you're a PhD student, you are all in. You can't have any outside work. There's really no wiggle room for error. The great thing about being a master's student is you have a little bit of wiggle room in that we don't have all those other commitments that we have to have. So, but to Joe's point, I think a huge advantage of being a master's student for me personally and for Joe is we're in class with a PhD student. So they're coming in with a lot of different experience and, you know, they're definitely very smart. So like we're learning a lot from them in class. Yes. So had we just been in a cohort with just master's students, we would have had a good experience. But I think being partnered with a PhD student, you know, so don't sweat if you can't be a PhD student because you can still learn a lot from them and, you know, kind of get some of that benefit. So.
Now, I'm one who's thinking of getting both my master's degree and a PhD. Is that something that seems like, you know, a reasonable possibility? Do you think one is better than the other?
A lot of programs have an MA PhD track. So like at Akron, our PhD students pick up their master's after 3 years, and then they pick up their PhD after they finish their dissertation. So Dr. Faust, you might be able to speak more to this, because for me, I think if you're on the PhD track, as long as you achieve that, I don't know that the master's will necessarily like elevate you anymore because you're putting PhD behind your name instead of MA. It accomplishes the MA and then some.
Yeah, I think the big thing is you need to think about what your end goal is.
Right.
You have to think of what your end goal is. In IO psychology, you can get a master's degree, go out in the workforce, and have a great job, great earning potential. And the only thing a PhD gains you in IO is you could maybe teach or do research or maybe get a little bit more pay. So it depends on your discipline and it depends on what your end goal is. If you want to be a licensed counselor, you can get that master's degree, get licensed, and do fantastic work. My son is going into social psychology. He has to get a PhD. You don't work in social psychology with a master's degree. So he has to go get a PhD, so he's in the same boat you guys are, taking GREs, applying to grad school. It depends on your end goal and what discipline you're going into, really. And we are always willing to work with you and help you. Any of us full-timers know a bunch of stuff, and if we don't, we send you to someone else so we can help you figure that out.
And kind of extending on that, one thing that you could do, depending on your discipline, as Dr. Faust said, is you can get your master's if you think, okay, let's see what I can do with this. And then if you're like, you know what, I'm not able to accomplish or get the jobs that I want with the master's degree, then reapply. I mean, a lot of people that go back after having their master's have a much higher chance getting into a PhD program, as happened with Dr. Faust. So that's always an option. That way you don't kind of bite off more than you can chew before realizing it's too late. Just take the first step and then, realign and then take it again. So.
You're the last table.
We're coming to you guys next. She's like, not me.
So how did you go about getting your scholarship? Like, what things did you look at when applying for scholarships?
So for us, the scholarships wasn't a huge option. The people who kind of got the scholarship were more the PhD students, and that's just kind of how like the structure of the program was worked. So just pay attention to what programs you're applying to, and a lot of the times the people that are on like the admissions board for that program will let you know like, hey, you are eligible for this scholarship or that, or they'll say there's not a lot of support, and then you can kind of realign based off of that.
Okay.
Yep.
So what did you do personally, Joe, to stand out as a master's student and get the scholarship?
I retired from the Army.
Cool.
I'm sorry, that's the truth. I'm still using my GI Bill, my post 9/11 Montgomery GI Bill. Is anybody else here? Are you on it? Okay. Anyone else? You are too? Okay. Keep using it. You can use it forever. All right. Take that stipend and put it in your pocket.
I mean, you haven't really paid much out of pocket for grad school, right?
No. No, I haven't paid a penny. Okay. Also, your FAFSA. You guys are both on FAFSA too?
No, I wasn't eligible.
Okay. Are you? Okay. Because you can double dip that stuff. So, and you put that in your pocket. All right. But maximize those hours.
And you can intern.
And, yeah, and I entered this summer to supplement my income. Yes.
So I'll ask in relation to the GI Bill then. Do you have enough credit hours to allow you that full BAH?
Yeah.
Okay.
This semester I don't. I fell 1 credit hour short. Seems silly, right? We're kind of getting off on a tangent here. Not a lot. This won't apply to a lot of people, but I need 9 credit hours to be considered a full-time student at the graduate level. Only 8 credit hours were available to me. 4 of them for my class, and 4 of them for my work-study program. So I fell short by 1 credit hour. And you can petition the university to have you recognized at a different level, but the university declined this time, so I took a hit.
Or take another course. So that was an option.
But it has to be degree producing.
Right.
And I had nothing. I had nothing left. So, you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Go, Dr. Faust. She's like lightning, man.
You're timing her.
So as an undergraduate student who doesn't have their bachelor's right now and wants to go for their master's, what can I do right now to increase my chances of getting into my choice university for the master's program?
So I know the one thing that, a couple things that really helped me, and I know Dr. Faust and I worked really closely to kind of make sure I was taking on opportunities or going after things that would put me in a great position. So like one thing we strategized is she was like, okay, you're a junior and you haven't had a applied internship yet. So, go out, try to get an internship. So I was lucky enough to get an internship, an HR internship in Cleveland. And again, it's not like super IO specific. It's really hard to get an IO internship at the undergrad level, but it was something. It was something that showed the graduate admissions office that, aside from managing full-time school, I was also trying to get like experiential learning and different coursework. Any leadership opportunities that you can take on campus, be it in like the student government, Psi Beta itself, in the community, a lot of these things go into the entire package that is your application and will be things that really strengthen. So obviously, there's hard cutoffs with like the GRE with some schools. So like for Joe and I, it was 150 for each test. We had to get a 150. So that's a firm thing. Everything else, it's kind of everyone comes in with different experience and ability. So just I would look at leadership and then internships as some of the main things. Yeah. Somebody over here.
Anyone. Anything. Just what kind of car do I drive? Anything like that?
Did you guys match on purpose?
Did we what? No. No, that was an accident.
Completely coincidental, huh?
We'll take credit though.
Yeah.
So if there's no more questions, Joe and I will make sure that this PowerPoint gets to whoever can disperse it to everyone. And then we will also share our personal emails. So if you guys want to reach out and you have any questions about maybe something you didn't want to ask, like in an open forum or just anything that you think about later, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to call you or email you or whatever. So.
If I could add to the tape.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if any of you here today were watching ever have any questions, obviously Brendan and Joe won't be here, but Dr. Faust, myself, and other full-time faculty and adjunct faculty are always here for questions about graduate school, especially also questions about what you can do, because there's many opportunities that we offer here at LCC, and so you definitely want to take advantage of that, because you're as these two indicated, you're going against some really smart people with high GPAs and high GREs. How do you differentiate yourself? Verbal reasoning, is to get involved and do things like they did with research and other things that they did to get in. So keep that in mind. And also, we do offer a professional career issues in psych in the spring. It's a 1-hour course. I know, Alyssa, Katie, you took that class. And we actually get into looking at graduate programs, and it'll help you. Talking about the book that Dr. G has, you can actually work with that, and it'll help you kind of decide in some directions which way you want to go. So I also want to take the time to thank the two of you for this fantastic presentation, and I'm sure it relieved a lot of fears, and also became a reality as well of what this is all about. So thank you.